Hello, Rink Rats. We're here today with somebody who I consider and many other people consider hockey royalty, especially in this area. If you're from Boston or New England or anywhere near here, the venerable Mr. Jack Kelley, coach at Colby, BU, and for my favorite professional team of all time, for reasons we'll get into, it should be obvious, the New England Whalers. Hi, Jack. How are we?
Joe, how are you? Nice to hear your voice.
You too. Good to hear yours. And you're down in Boca Raton with the beautiful people right now?
Well, we're trying to duck the winter, and we've done that for the last few years. And
Yep.
although we're holed up like everybody else, Joe, I
I
haven't
know
been
it.
out of the premises for like 3 weeks, but I'm doing what they're telling me.
Yep. And hopefully summer should be here momentarily and we'll be out of this thing.
That's a wish for everybody.
So, Jack, I thought we'd start at the very beginning, Medford, Massachusetts. Can you remember the first time you put skates on?
Yeah, I can. I was very fortunate. Actually, my first few years was in Somerville, but my folks had the good fortune of buying a home over in Belmont, right on the Belmont-Arlington line, about maybe 1,000 yards or so from Spy Pond. So the fact that I lived so close to a huge body of water that everybody skated on,
Yep.
I just joined everybody else and had a wonderful time during the winter months.
You had everybody over there, and well, of course, your protege, Jackie Parker from Somerville, but you're the Rileys, Dick Desmond, Jack Garrity, all those guys from Medford.
Well, I always said I was probably one of the last pond skaters. I never actually played inside a rink until my sophomore year of high school, when they held the practices inside Boston Garden. That in itself was a thrill. But I remember there's probably 100 kids trying out for the team, and that was the first moment I ever set my skates on an indoor arena. So I can honestly say I got my start out on the ponds.
But your first sheet of ice that you skated on was in the garden?
That's right.
That's unbelievable. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a thrill that must have been for a high school
Well, it
guy.
was, no question.
Jack's a member of the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, the Mass Hockey Hall of Fame, where you were inducted along with my dad that night, the BU Hall of Fame, and the WHA Hall of Fame. If I left somebody out, Jack, forgive me, but there's 4 Hall of Fames right there.
Well, I'm in the Maine Sports Hall of Fame, too, which actually pleases me a great deal also.
Yep, your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Your neck of the woods. Played on the 48-49 U.S. national team, which my dad was on the 50 team, so, and you were a defenseman.
Well, I was, but I played up front quite a bit, too, but I had the best time playing it back at defense. I enjoyed that probably the most.
Yeah, that's what they all say, because you see the whole game from back there, you know?
Yeah.
Unless you're the goalie, which can be boring for most of the game.
Yeah.
But.
Well, what also was fun, my last year in college, I played with my kid brother Paul, who was the goaltender, so that particular year had a lot of meaning, a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. And then BU 49-52, you played in 2 Frozen Fours at BU.
Yeah, and we should have played in our senior year, too. We went something like 15-3-1 our senior year, and they had been talking prior to that particular year to having a playoff, and a few of the coaches, I won't name who, were holding out for actually for a playoff, and that particular year they kind of got stubborn on it, and they wanted a 4-team playoff between BU, BC, Yale, and Brown. We felt that we deserved to go. BC felt they deserved to go, and the two administrations got together and said, no, if you don't pick us, we're just not going to play. And they didn't pick us and sent Yale and Brown that year. So however, ironically, through that thing, I think there was some negotiating going on, and BU and BC arranged a football game that actually never got played because it happened on the just prior to the assassination of Jack Kennedy. Now there's a bypass. If Bill Flynn was around right now, I'll bet he could verify that story.
Yep. Eddie Carroll might be able to if I see Eddie.
Well, Eddie might. If Eddie's still with us, he certainly could.
Eddie is very much still with us down the street. He walks 3 miles every other day. He's making everyone else in the neighborhood look bad.
Good for Ed. Give him my best.
I will. And Bobby Sylvia is right down the street, too. He told me to say hi.
You know Bobby, too. Wow.
Yep, know Bobby well. This is where I live, Jack. I'm down Grant Rock, Green Harbor, and Marshfield, and I swear to God, this is where old hockey players go to die. Because they're all down here.
Well, when I was a kid, my folks used to take us down to Fieldston and Marshfield, and we went there for about 4 or 5 summers, and
that's where I
had fond memories of that.
That's where I am right now. My cottage is in Fieldston, right here.
Well, I know that area quite well, Joe.
Now you went from your playing days. You coached Colby 55 to 62, where you had a 73, 45, and 3 record, and then over to BU from 62 to 72. The Whalers 72, 73. Then you were GM for a few years after that. Back to Colby, back to the Whalers, and back to the Penguins. So you saw some hockey games.
Well, I saw a few along the way. Still seeing them whenever I can.
Unbelievable.
We get a couple of times we get down to see the Panthers play down here. When Chicago or Pittsburgh comes into town, I'm always usually at the games because I see people that I've known in the past. It's kind of fun.
You had 2 consecutive NCAA championships, 4 ECAC championships, 1962 Pensa Spenrose Award recipient, and the Avco Cups with my favorite team, the New England Whalers. So we were lucky. We had the Bruins win in 70, 72, and then you guys picked up the slack in 73. So that was good.
It was a great run that we had at that time, and a lot of fun, really.
I enjoyed watching them more than the Bruins, and I'm not alone. Craig Janey, a bunch of other guys say the same thing.
Well, I think the Whalers accomplished a lot, but one thing they accomplished that I don't know that people focus in on, when they were drafting the first WHA draft, I couldn't go because I was still coaching at BU, and it was held out in Long Beach, California, and they were holding the draft out there, and I had up all my lists of players who I wanted to draft, taking my turn every time the Whalers came up. And as we were drafting, I started drafting some college kids that I had a lot of confidence in that I thought were ready to make the next step. And out in Long Beach, every time they came up with a college player, there used to be a chuckle through the other 11 teams. They all thought I was putting together a college hockey team to play the first year in the WHA. But as they found out, all of those young players really were ready to step into pros. And I think a lot of people watching and observing what we did made them aware that college players were ready to step into the pros. And from that point on, you started seeing college players drafted on a regular basis. Today, it's a number one thing. I mean, it's amazing how it's turned about in the last 20, 25 years.
So you might have invented United States pro hockey players. So they were all laughing at you, but you're probably sitting there like the cat that ate the canary, knowing what you had, you know?
Well, these kids were outstanding players. I mean, I had some BC kids. Johnny Cuniff, I mean, Johnny could have played pro. He just didn't have the right teams coming out. They wanted him out of junior hockey or occasionally out of Europe. They weren't looking for anybody out of the colleges. Tim Sheehy, Kevin Ahern, Paul Hurley, all great kids and all great hockey players, along with a bunch of BU players from my own school. So,
Who were the BU guys that you grabbed?
well, Rick Jordan,
Yeah.
Bobby Brown, Jake Danby. I might be forgetting somebody. I hope not.
I remember those guys. They say that Brown was a great player.
Bobby was a great college player. I'm not sure his game was suited to the pros, but he was absolutely an outstanding college player. Rick was an outstanding college player, and he did adjust to the pro level and really played very well that year.
Now, if you could think of NCAA players all time, if you had to use BU guys if you want, use anybody. If you could pick a starting six, 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and 1 goalie all time that you ever saw, that you had to put on in a 3-2 game with 2 minutes left, who would you put out there?
Who would I put out there for my own team?
Whatever.
I mean, I know them the best. I'll tell you, the first guy I'd put out there would be Jake Danby, because Jake Danby was that kind of a player. And the other player who would play right beside him would be Ron Ryan, who played for me at Colby.
Is that right?
They were money players. They could take pressure and accept pressure. A lot of players play hard, but they don't always accept pressure well and play well under pressure.
Yeah, and who would you put in goal?
Well, that's a good question. I could have Kenny Dryden. I'd take him.
I knew you were going to say Kenny Dryden. I knew it.
I used to moan and say, God, I wish Dryden hadn't come through the times, because we had some outstanding teams and lost to them in the NCAA finals. But Kenny was just superb. I mean, he was so tough to beat. And I remember people saying, stop complaining. And then Kenny shows up at Montreal, and then I heard a lot of Boston Bruins playing. Dryden this, Dryden that. Well, they got a taste of what we were playing against them in college.
You know what comes to mind, as you mentioned, that 71 when Dryden just manhandled the Bruins. And I can remember an interview in the Bruins locker room after the final game. Phil Esposito looked incredulous, shaking his head like he couldn't believe how good he was.
Yeah, well, he was, and they are talking about someone who could accept pressure. Kenny Dryden could accept any kind of pressure that came his way.
And then he'd lean on that stick and make you look like it was easy, you know? Oh.
That frustrated a few people.
Oh, that would drive you nuts.
Not if you were rooting for his team.
Oh, now, tell me about Coach Jerry York, BC coach, as a player, you know, and him and Jackie Parker as players, because everybody now thinks of them as coaches, but you saw them both play.
Well, I wanted them both to come to BU, obviously. Jack did, Jerry didn't, but I kind of knew Jerry wasn't going to come to BU. You know, he was going to BC High, and that's usually the nail in the coffin as far as I was concerned in trying to recruit a player. But Jerry certainly was in my scope, and I would have loved to have the opportunity to coach him. Jerry's just an incredible coach. I mean, I am so amazed at what he's achieved, and being recently elected into the NHL Hockey Hall of Fame tells me that everybody else who knows him realizes how outstanding he is.
They woke him up.
Ironically, Jerry and I kind of stay in touch from time to time. We email each other and kind of have some fun back and forth with commentary, and he's a special guy. Jackie's almost like a son to me. I listened to a little of Jack's interview. I'm surprised he didn't tell you one thing. He grew up next door to my kissing cousin, Grace Kelley. And Grace used to tell me, you got to recruit these Parker boys. And I knew that Bobby had been playing hockey a little bit more than Jack, but she kept saying, "You've got to recruit these kids. You've got to, really stay on top of them and get them to go to BU." And I did, and I tried to. And Bobby, at the last minute, decided he wanted to go to BC.
Yep.
But I was lucky enough to get Jack to come, and as they say, the rest is history.
And he was the captain. The one word I see that comes up that describes him as a player is scrappy.
Scrappy?
Yeah.
Well, he was, he needed all of his ability to play. I mean, he wasn't a highly gifted hockey player, but he was highly gifted in hockey sense. Jack knew where the puck was going to be. I'm going to tell you, he would end up where the puck was, and that was a skill and just an overall knowledge that, an innocence that he had, and he took full advantage of that. Was a very effective college hockey player, and that's what made him such a good coach.
Yeah.
I mean, he was thinking the game from the minute he got on the ice until the game was over.
So he had great anticipation. He probably got that from his basketball upbringing.
Well, he loves that game of basketball. There's no question about that.
Yep.
But he was right in deciding to play hockey. I don't know that he would have much of a future as a basketball player unless they had, teams of 5'8", whatever.
I asked him, were you a forward or a guard? And he just looked at me like, come on, are you kidding me? I was a guard, Look at me. He's an inch taller than I am, I think. Now, I talked to Jimmy Logue, who said you tried to recruit him to go to Colby, and he told me a story. In the mid-'60s, Logie and Red Martin played for the Waterville Bruins Saturday nights in Lewiston and Sunday afternoons in Waterville, playing against Canadian senior teams in sold-out arenas. And he said,
absolutely.
He said before the game, the announcer would say, "Welcome to big-time hockey."
Yeah, well, it was a great era. It was really prior to everybody getting nailed down by TV and all the number of things that they offer you now on sporting events. So people were still looking for outside activities, and we had the Waterville Bruins. I actually had nothing to do with them other than scheduling the games in the arena. It was a local group of guys who did an excellent job, and the townspeople really took to it and supported it. And those same town people supported our games too. We used to sell out our games, put 24, 25, 2,600 in the arena every game that Colby played, and they'd be all there again on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, they're all playing, I mean, especially the arena down here where every team played there. How difficult was it scheduling games and practices at the arena with all the other teams playing there too?
Well, we were second best to the schoolboys because the arena was owned by the state, and the state, I think, at that time, determined that schools would have first crack, and we took what was left. Joe Tomasello was the director at that time, and he was very good. He would knock himself out to find ice time for us. But that was really one of the biggest difficulties we had at BU while I was there, and that's what's, we had our drive for our new arena. But that took almost the whole 10 years I was there at the school. It wasn't a very easy project, but we sandwiched enough ice time in between the games, and actually I'd bring the team in and get Joe to give me 15 minutes prior to one afternoon schoolboy hockey games to another set coming in the evening. And, all I could do in 15 minutes is skate them, but we'd skate them and try to, at least keep our legs so we were, could go forward when the games came along.
Jack said it, and Jack, anybody who knows him knows how smart he is. He was a finance major, but he said the best education he ever got was as your assistant coach.
Well, I'm flattered by that, but he certainly helped me while he was there those 3 years. There's no question. Actually, when I left, there was conversation of whether Jack should be considered as coach. But at that point in time, I think they just felt he was maybe a little too young or a little too experienced, or maybe not fair to stick him in behind me. And I think the people who knew best, certainly kept him around. And when the opportunity came, moved him in, and what an incredible job he did. When I left, I was there 10 years, and he said the 10 years at BU were like 20. Jack was there 40. I can't imagine what he thought those 40 years were like. BU is a great school, but not an easy school to coach at.
No. Well, I don't think any of them are really, right?
No. Well, there are drawbacks, and best left unsaid.
Yep. Diplomacy is the best way to go. Timmy Sheehy, I talked to last night, and he emailed me this morning, and this leads into one of Timmy's questions. Timmy says, after your storied career and given what the NHL coaches are paid today, do you think you would have lasted 10 years at BU today as you did then, considering the dough they make now?
Say that once again. Let me make sure I get that question correct.
Timmy said, considering what they're paying the NHL coaches these days, do you think you would have lasted 10 years at BU if you had the opportunity to make the kind of dough these guys are making today?
That's a good question. When I left BU to go into the pros, I thought I was ready to do that. Hopefully I would have been smart enough to not have left BU before I would have thought I was prepared to do the job, not so much for what I was going to get paid. But I sit here and read these salaries and say, good for them.
Yeah.
We sure didn't get that kind of money, and the players didn't get that kind of money back then. But, we were doing something we loved, and we certainly enjoyed it. And, you look forward to every day while you're involved.
You know what? That's what Tommy Miller said. I talked to him last night, too, and he said, I go, Tommy, how come you didn't play in the WHA? And he said his whole dream was to play in the NHL, and he had a 4 or 5 year pro career in Sweden and AHL and everything, but he said, once he got in the NHL, that was good enough for him. It wasn't about the money. He just wanted to play in an original 16.
He certainly was capable of doing that. He's another one of those great college hockey players that I'm glad got the opportunity. And I'm not taking full credit, but like I said early on, I think we exposed to the NHL and other people in the game that college kids could step right in and make their mark.
Well, you know what Timmy said last year, and this is something that should have occurred to me in my 55 years, but hadn't until I heard him say it. He said, people don't understand, we were hockey players, that was our job, that's what we wanted to do for work, and until the WHA, most of the American kids really didn't have a chance. So he said the WHA, we looked at it like it was a company that gave us jobs. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, you had to be a Canadian coming out of Junior A to be considered. They just never thought of the college kids. And I don't know how long that. It would have eventually happened, obviously. But again, no one can take it away from us. We were the first to expose it, and I'm pretty proud of those guys because they certainly stood up and showed everybody they were capable. Not only were we successful, we won the first WHA Cup, and everybody had the same opportunity. Everybody had the same opportunity to draft whoever they wanted to and try to sign them. And I think it was, pretty fair achievement for us to draft and draft wisely and also win the cup that year.
Was Larry Plow the first recruit to the Whalers from the NHL?
He was the first one we signed.
Yeah.
Because I knew Larry as a kid growing up, but he left back in high school and went up and played junior hockey because he was showing enough here at that time that he had the skill to probably go on and play at the pro level. But they weren't going to leave him around here to play college hockey, so they, enticed him to go north, and of course he did, and he excelled, and the Canadians signed him, and when we had our opportunity, we drafted him and signed him, and he played for us.
Yeah, and he was one of the top players on your team too.
He was a great center iceman.
Now, back to Timmy Shee. Timmy said, ask Jack about the importance of stability of raising a family in one place. When you're a hockey guy, you know what I mean?
Boy, if you could do that, that's a trick. I mean, I was kind of lucky because my kids first got their first 10 years in around Boston and what have you, and actually they were all. I think we had them up here in Waterville, Maine, and they were all about 6, 7, 8 years old when they came down. So they actually got to play pretty much all their, go to school pretty much all in the States, Walpole and Belmont. So they didn't have to move around too much. But my wife and I, we moved around quite a bit. So
yeah.
We were fortunate that our kids were in a more stable situation prior to my getting involved in traveling with hockey.
Like you said, that's a neat trick if you can do it, right?
Yeah, it is a neat trick.
Now, Timmy's got 4 or 5 questions. I haven't heard him talk this much in 20 years. Timmy said, where did you enjoy the game the most, as a player, head coach, GM, or as president?
Well, I certainly love playing. I would have loved to play pro hockey. Those opportunities just weren't even considered back when I came out of BU, but I certainly would have loved that. The best year I ever had playing hockey, other than my senior year, was a year overseas when we played 40 or 50 games and playing 2 or 3 games a week, traveling all over Europe. That was a dream come true because I was only 21 years of age and everything was so new to me and so exciting. Jack Roddy was the coach of that team.
Yep.
But what I enjoyed the most, I've always said this, the 2 hours I spent every afternoon coaching with the kids on the ice. Those are the most pleasant 2 hours I would have each day and through the week. But the exams the games were the exams. If we had practiced well and played well, then that was a great week.
Well said. Well said. Timmy's final question. Did you ever dream of winning the Stanley Cup as an American coach like Badger Bob Johnson did with Calgary with Joey Mullen and company back in the 80s?
Well, I think at one point in time when we were the Whalers and we first went into the NHL, I probably had some wild thoughts that we could possibly be successful and maybe win a Stanley Cup. But I've had the fun of being part of a family. My son Mark is vice president of amateur scouting for Chicago Blackhawks. He's won it 3 times, and my grandson Andy Socia, who went to BU and did all the video work for Jack Parker, is doing the video work for Mike Sullivan, and he's won it twice with Pittsburgh. So we've had 5 Stanley Cup parties. So I feel I'm quite rich, and I don't know that I should have expected more.
You're the richest guy in town, like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Yeah, right.
Timmy Rapley, who wrote the book Jack Parker's Wise Guys, who's a great guy, told me a story yesterday that Bill LeBlanc, a great BU player, told him. He said that you saw LeBlanc's last prep school game, Westminster versus Deerfield, and told Jackie Parker about him. And LeBlanc said that if you didn't go to that one game and tell Jack, he would have never played Division I hockey.
That's true. That's true. I don't know why I went to that game. I can't imagine what the reason was, but I couldn't take my eyes off this kid with his poise and the way he handled it. And as soon as the game was over, I was on the phone to Jack. I said, Jack, I don't see many, but I saw this one, and if you can, get out and take a look at him. I think he's got the goods to be able to play at your level. And
he certainly did. He was on the '78 NCAA team.
Yes, he proved to be that kind of a player.
Yep, you were right, as usual. Now, just a couple of questions from Richard Schoenfeld, who's probably the #1 BC hockey fan on the planet. He's president of the varsity club over there now. He asked, do you remember Snook's 500th win?
Are you kidding me? Of course I do. I got to tell you a little story.
Yep.
We were playing BC at Colby, home and home, for a couple of years, and BC came up to Colby, and we knocked them off 2-1 in overtime. And everybody was, congratulating me and hugging me, and all of a sudden, the first guy that came walking onto the bench was Snooks, and he gave me the biggest hug and said, "Congratulations, kid." He always called me
everybody
kid.
was kid, yep.
Congratulations, kid. Your team has arrived. And that to me was the best compliment I probably had ever got in my life at that point.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was so magnificent in his praise, and the fact that he was such a very good loser. So now let's go fast forward. It's my last year. I know I'm leaving, and ironically, Snooks had announced his retirement, and we were all watching his, I guess 97th, 98th, and said, "Oh my gosh, it looks like he's going to be playing his 500th game against me." Well, certainly I didn't want to be his 500th victim, but in any event, the game came. His team, played an incredible game and knocked us off. I think it was 7-5, it was 6-5. I think we pulled our goalie and they got an empty netter. But they won the game. And I got out in the middle of the ice and gave Snooks a big hug and whispered as your team has arrived. And he laughed and he laughed and he laughed.
You threw the line right back at him? Oh, that's great.
Yeah, well, I'd always remembered that. And he laughed and laughed. And but underneath, believe me, I was not very happy. And I went in to the dressing room and obviously told my players I wasn't too happy with them. And we used that loss as really as a reason to pick up and go the rest of the way to win our second national championship. So I got some good out of it. But there's another story that people seem to know, and this is true too. I went home, and I was mumbling all the way home, and my wife was saying, "Forget about it. It's a game. Forget about it." And I said, "No, I can't forget about it." And I was very upset. So I parked the car, and I come around to the back of the house to come in, and the door is locked. And I push it, and it's still locked again. So I gave it a kick and knocked it in. My wife didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. She was so upset with me. And I was very upset over the fact I did not want to be Snook's 500th win. I did the right thing in public, but out of the sight of the public, I was some miffed. And then I get a telegram the very next morning from Jack Riley telling me thank you because they were playing West Point the next game, and he said, "Thank you. I didn't want to be Snook's 500th." Now that's another story that I'm sure even maybe Jack's kids don't know about.
Well, they will now.
Yeah.
They will now. That reminds me of a story. You remember Stevie McBride? He played for you in the mid-'60s. And,
sure.
And
I know Stevie.
He was
I knew the whole McBride family. His brother
John and Tommy.
Played for me, and
Yep.
Bobby played for me up at Colby.
Yep. And I remember the story. I talked to him. Yeah, I talked to everybody yesterday when I told him I was going to be talking to you. And he said he reminded me Billy Riley at Lowell was going for his, I think, 300th win, and Stevie, you know his nickname is Turkey. Turkey was doing the games, and he could be kind of a notorious referee, and he kept calling crazy penalties against Lowell just to give it to Billy.
He was calling penalties against me. His memory is a bit faulty.
but he went over, and Billy said, leaned over the bench and said, "Turkey, what are you doing to me? You're killing me." And he goes, "If you think you're going to get your 300th win on my watch, you're crazy."
Well, I think he did.
Yeah, I think he did too. I think he did too. Now, here's a question, and this makes me think of my father. Do coaches win games or do teams win games?
Well, obviously the coach, if you take what they do preparing and practicing and all of that, that's where you make your impact, and recruiting too. Let's not forget that part of it. But players win the game. Who's kidding who?
Yeah.
The skill players win the game. Coaches can take a mediocre talent and make them respectable. They can't make them great. It's much easier to be a good coach if you recruit great players. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So there's no iron team. It's the whole show altogether. What would you say that this question's from Tommy Mella, number 4. What's the biggest difference between coaching college and the pros?
Well, I didn't find much difference, to tell you the truth. I think I had to think of them more as family people, that they had responsibilities to wives and children, and not just kids playing for me. That probably was the biggest adjustment, thinking every time I said something to them that they're all young adults, many of them married and many with children. I'd say that was the biggest adjustment, not so much the coaching on the ice. I think most players love to be coached if they're really interested in what they're doing. I think they like to people to work with them and try to improve their abilities.
You remember the great coaches you had, you remember the great teachers you had, and sometimes they're both, right?
Well, you do. I remember certain officials who at times took me apart, and as a kid growing up, and whispered things in my ear that made more sense to me sometimes than what coaches said. And not so much, how to play the game, but how to conduct yourself on the ice.
Right. Those officials back then didn't take any crap from anybody.
No, they didn't. And I'm thinking of guys like Bill Father, and Sonny Foley and Doc Gutrow and guys of that nature.
Old Man Cleary.
That goes back way beyond what you remember.
Eddie Barry, all those guys.
Eddie too, yeah.
What opposing coaches did you have the most respect for?
Well, I certainly had a ton of respect for Snooks. No question about that. He did so much for the game. But I had a ton of respect also for Eddie Jeremiah. Eddie Jeremiah probably was one of the best coaches of that era. And I remember getting his book and reading it and devouring it and all of that. So I've watched every coach and tried to pick things away from them that I thought they really were good at. And, you do that, and then you kind of try to put it into your own philosophy and then become, the kind of coach you want to be. But certainly when I was coaching, I had a lot of respect for Snooks and Eddie Jeremiah. And another gentleman who did a lot for the game was I'm trying to think of Eddie Gallagher.
Herb Gallagher?
Yeah, Herb Gallagher, right, at Northeastern. Herb was a real gentleman, a real, very knowledgeable guy.
I think I have Eddie Jeremiah's book somewhere here at my house.
Well,
my father,
when you get a chance, read it.
I know I did as a kid, but I'm pretty sure I still have it.
The game isn't played that Bible of the game.
I'll tell you, if I know I have this. My father's little 8 or 10 page treatise on goaltending, which if you read today, it's like you're reading hieroglyphics on a cave wall. I mean, he's talking about tucking felt inside your goalie pads and all this stuff. It's hysterical. It's hysterical, but that's the way it was.
Yeah, the game, it changes as like everything changes.
Yep, the great ones adjust, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Now,
That's key to things too.
Now, these questions are from Mike Maloney Jr. He played BC in the late 80s. His dad played for BC in the early 60s, along with Logie and Red and those guys. And he asked me to throw some names at you and get some thoughts. Vic Stanfield.
Vic, I recruited Vic, and he was a freshman my last year, and Bobby Murray had got injured. Bobby was one of our regular defensemen, and he got injured in the ECAC games and couldn't play in the NCAA finals. So I brought Vic up, and Vic was the first and only freshman who ever played for me in my entire career as a college coach.
That was an excellent.
Freshmen were never eligible until that particular year. But we never played any of our freshmen that year because it was such a veteran team coming back from having won the Nationals the year before.
Right.
Vic was, a tremendous talent, and of course his best years were still in front of him, and I think he's considered one of the BU's all-time defensemen.
Herb Wakabayashi.
Herbie, well, we're playing this is an interesting story, too. We're playing in the Christmas tournament that Joe Tomasello used to have each year, and he had Michigan playing. And we were going to play Michigan this particular night, and I'm watching this kid warm up, and his name was Wakabayashi. And I call him over to the pen. I never did this, but I said, "Hey, Mel Wakabayashi." I said, "Mel, you got any brothers?" He says, "Yeah, I got a brother up in Chatham, Ontario." And I said, "Does he play hockey?" He says, "Oh yeah, he plays hockey." I said, "Really?" And that's all.
That was it.
So I got on a plane, flew up to Chatham, and found Herbie Wakabayashi playing Junior B for I think it was Chatham Junior B team. Eddie Wright was on that team, and Mickey Gray was on that team. So I recruited 3 players off that particular club. So yeah, I remember Herbie.
that airline ticket paid for itself.
It most certainly did.
How good we already mentioned Timmy Sheehy, but how good was Timmy Sheehy and how good was Joe Kavanaugh?
Well, Joe was an outstanding college hockey player, and you certainly focused on him when you were playing Harvard, and you had to neutralize him as best you could. I mean, he could beat you. There's no question of that. Timmy was just a natural. He could do anything. Timmy would have played in the NHL from the word go, and I was lucky enough to get him in the WHA. And Timmy had all the skills to do anything, and I'll tell you, he could finish off a play. He could put the puck in the net. Yeah. I'm just glad he didn't do it too often when he played for BC against me, but he sure did it for me many times playing for me in the WHA. I think the world of Tim Sheehy. He may be a BC alum, but he's one of my boys.
Yep. Timmy's one of the classiest, nicest guys in the world of hockey, and you know that. Let me see. Thinking back, you have the Avco Cup, you have your NCAA Frozen Four victories. What would you say your fondest memories looking back on your long career?
Well, I would say one of the greatest achievements of winning the NCAA back-to-back. No one else in the East has ever done it. It's happened a couple of times out in the West, but no one's done it in the East. So that tells you what an achievement that was. And both of those teams were exceptional. They were made up of a number of just outstanding hockey players, and I had the good fortune of being their coach, and that certainly is one of my memories. I think beating BC 2-1 up at Colby is one of my magic moments in overtime. I mean, you can just imagine young little old Colby beating BC, and then when I went back to BC, I coached a bunch of great young kids for 1 year, and my son Mark played on that team, and we were kind of a mediocre team, but we came to play every single night, and we were scheduled to play Northeastern, and Northeastern was having a pretty decent season, and somehow we knocked them off and beat them 4-2, and that happened to be my 300th win, and my son Mark had a couple of goals and assists in the game, so that's always a special moment.
That's a pretty good night for your family right there.
Right.
I think, did Mark play with Joe Augustine somewhere along the line? I think he did. Joe's coaching down at URI now. He played at BC, as you know. I think they played together at one point.
Well, he could have. Did he go to Colby, did he?
No, Joe went to BC, but he played on a million teams.
Mark went to Belmont Hill, played at Belmont Hill for all 4 years, and then from there went on to Colby, and after that went over and played in Austria for a year, and then finished up playing for the Binghamton AHL team back, maybe late 80s or early 80s, rather 81, somewhere around there.
Traveling around is half the fun with these guys who get to see the world a little bit.
Yeah, well, those are great experiences. And, getting over, a lot of kids did back in those days get over and play another year or two at that level. Not too many get that opportunity today, but that was something that most of the college kids who couldn't find a place to play pro hockey went to get that extra year or two in.
And what advice, Jack, would you have for today's young players and kids today?
What would I advise them to do?
Yeah, just, what advice would you have for young players today?
Well, just first of all, hope that you get an opportunity to play for the right coach, the one who is going to teach you how to play the game the proper way, and you have parents that are just going to enjoy that you're playing and not think that you're Bobby Orr or something of that nature, and you have fun playing, that it's not something that you're going to work to keep the game fun, and just be prepared to give whatever comes your way, give it 100%, so you never have any regrets.
And what else is on your mind, Jack? Anything else you want to touch on?
Hold on just a second.
Yep.
Your story sounds so interesting now. I wish I could hear it.
Okay, Joe, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I had to do something here.
That's fine. That's fine.
All right. Ask that question one more time.
You have any final thoughts you want to touch on? Anything I left out?
No, other than the fact that I appreciate you taking time to nail down an old coach. I'll be 93 come this July, so not too many people seek me out anymore, Joe, to find out my thoughts and my impressions, but I appreciate that, and as I told you in our private conversation, your dad was a very, very special person. It was hard for me to dislike BC because of your dad, and I saw a picture of you and your father, and your father wasn't smiling in the picture. And I'm going to tell you that's the only time I think I've ever looked at your father and not seen a smile on his face.
You know why? Now that you say it, I think it's because I was holding a regular hockey stick and not a goalie stick at the age of 3. I was 3 years old. I think that might have pissed him off a little bit.
Your father probably did not want you to be a goalie. I'll bet if you brought it up, he always changed the subject.
Well, as I told you, I was lucky enough to be adopted by my father, but I was only a mediocre goalie, so I didn't inherit his goalie gene.
I'll tell you, well, when you play goal for an NCAA championship team, I think that tells you what kind of a goaltender he was. And,
all right, Rink Rats, we're back with the Dean of USA Professional Hockey, Jack Kelley. We got cut off accidentally a week ago, and it was good in a way because we had some time to think about some things, and some things happened. But I think the last thing you were saying, Jack, was you were talking about my dad as a goalie.
Yeah, well, he was an outstanding goalie. Anybody who can lead a team to an NCAA championship is outstanding. If you don't have goaltending, you can't even get on the same ice with some of these other teams. And your dad was so well liked by everybody. We all had things for the other team, but there were certain players that you always seemed to enjoy and root for, and your dad was just a good guy. Matter of fact, I mentioned to you earlier, I gave him a little boost when he was officiating football, and he did a lot of games up at Colby College when I was coaching up there. And I think you told me that he also had an assignment for the Army-Navy football game, and there's nothing bigger than that. So that tells you the integrity he had in that particular sport.
I was a sophomore at BC High. I think it was 1980, and I know referees are supposed to be impartial, but I'm sure he rooted for Navy. You know what I mean?
I'm sure he was impartial.
He was. He was nothing if not fair. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now we're all in lockdown in America during this crazy virus thing, but I'll tell you, I've been lucky enough to get to know you, Jack, over the last couple of weeks. I don't think there's been a couple of days we haven't talked, and if we're in lockdown, but we're in hockey lockdown, and I couldn't be luckier to talk to a better hockey guy during a hockey lockdown than you. So,
well, thank you for that, Joe.
So I'm much appreciative to have a new friend, and you've just been tremendous. Now let's see what we got going on here. We could go on forever.
The last time we talked, you asked me if there were some special moments in my career, achievements that stood out or that I took certain pleasure in. And I mentioned a few, but there was one that I did not mention, and I just plain forgot about it. Just recently, it came to my attention that in all the active college coaches over the years, starting from, I think, right after World War II, I had the third highest winning percentage, and I really wasn't aware of that. The number one was Ned Harkness, and I'm sure that comes as no surprise. And the other gentleman was Billy Harrison, who played at Dartmouth and coached at Clarkson right after World War II. And what pleasures me is my first year I went to Colby. Obviously, freshmen were not eligible to play then. They had not had any formal hockey program probably for 10 or 12 or 15 years. So with the new rink, we were kind of starting from scratch. And I can almost tell you, if you could skate and maneuver around on the ice, you were going to make the team that first year. And we won just 5 games. So and the 5 games was quite an achievement, as a matter of fact. And when I came to BU later, BU had just finished last in the ECAC, and that program was kind of, in a pause, and I took over that. And in my first year, I only won 7 games, and at the end of that year, it was still in last place. So that gives you an indication of where I was starting from. So we won 12 games in the first year of my 2 coaching assignments, but we didn't have freshmen. And it took a little while to get the freshmen in, get them up to speed and playing by the second year. So the fact that we went from starting in a deep hole to ending up 3rd overall in winning percentages, that's kind of a personal achievement for me, and I do take pleasure in that.
I think your winning percentage, I looked at it, I think it was .7, I want to say .730, which is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
We had some great teams, and both at Colby and at BU. I wished I would have had the opportunity to have freshmen, but you know, there was also a value to having a freshman program too, because when the kids had so much to adjust to that first year coming into college, but when they stepped in as a sophomore, they were mature and knew what was expected of them, and that had its benefits too.
Yeah, and you know what I was thinking. I mean, I'm gonna jump all over the place here. I have no really order to my questions, but there's a guy who very, very rarely gets mentioned. Jack mentioned him when I talked to the other Jack, and I think of you guys. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost, I'm going to say, is Bob Crocker.
Well, Bob did an incredible job with the freshmen. Believe me, he was a father figure. And I think Bob picked up our program very well and carried that on the ice. But his real importance was getting the kids to settle in and being their personal friend, and because that was invaluable those first years. When you bring Canadian kids down, it's all new to them. They're not as experienced being outside of their own network, and some get very homesick and want to take off. And what we did with a lot of them, we set them up with homes with families from the Friends of BU Hockey, and they would invite them over for Sundays and stuff like that for dinner, and try to, get them to feel as if, they were important and they were part of the entire program. And Bob was very good at that. He stayed on top of these guys and was always there with a very lending ear as to what their personal problems were. And I recognize that and give him all sorts of credit for his portion of the success we had at BU.
And he was the baseball coach too, and one of those guys, and kind of like BU's version of my father in a way.
Well, let me tell you about the baseball coach.
When
I first came down to interview from the job, I wasn't sure I wanted to come back to BU. I had something going very well up at Colby, and I love the school. I love it to this day. However, when I came down, they said the job also included being the baseball coach. Well, that's not my interest. I like baseball, but not as a college coach. And I told them that as long as I had to be the baseball coach, I wasn't interested in the job. And I went back up to Colby thinking it was all over. And somehow a professor from BU came on campus, talked to me for a while, and all of a sudden there was another phone call and saying I could come back and just be the hockey coach. So that's an interesting side story of my return to BU.
So Bob Crocker brought you back in a sense.
Well, Bob got the job, and I think he was thrilled to have it. He did a great job as the baseball coach. And believe me, they always talk about our team being a team without a home, playing over at the arena whenever we could. Bob didn't have a baseball stadium either, and he played all over the place. So both those teams struggled to find a place where they could say, hey, this is our rink, or this is our ballpark.
The great thing about those days is all you guys did your job. You didn't do it for the money, obviously. You did it for the love of the game.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Without getting into facts and figures, you know what I'm talking about,
I most certainly do. Compared to what's happening today,
Oh, my God.
different worlds.
My father was coach of the golf team for a couple of years after Snooks, and he said he had to quit because he was losing money buying kids clubs.
That could very easily happen.
Yeah. All right. One thing I wanted to correct before I go on is I mentioned Joe Augustine earlier, and Joe went to school with your son, with Paul Siglaski, and he went to school with one of your other sons. And Mike Sanford, Northeastern, Eddie Sanford's son was on the team. Brad
Well, that
Holt.
was up at Berkshire. No, not Berkshire. Berwick. Academy.
Berwick, that's where it was.
Right.
And that's where he played
Paul
with your
was
son.
there. Paul played at Belmont Hill for 4 years, then went to Berwick for 1 year with Paul Whalen, and from there went on to Colby.
Yeah, and he said Brad Holt, Charlie Holt's son, was on the team too. A lot of names on that team. So one thing that we decided on after we talked last week, and it was last Thursday, today's Wednesday, after Easter was last Sunday, but we talked about dedicating this interview to the Travis Roy Foundation, and so we're gonna do that, and I'm sure Travis will approve. So we're gonna run that banner across the interview for the Travis Roy Foundation.
That's good. Thank
you. Mark Riley told me a story the other night that his mother and that you and your wife were introduced to each other by Jack.
I introduced Maureen to Jack.
Oh, you introduced them. Okay.
That's what happened. Maureen and I worked together down on the Cape when we were in college or somewhere around there. We got to know each other quite well, and we're great friends. And she had a brother that I got to know very well, who was always a super nice guy and a friend. And when I was trying out, and this is all fact, when I was trying out for the 1949 World Hockey Team, Jack was the coach. And somehow, and I have no idea what brought this up, Jack came over to me and he says, I understand you know Maureen Hines. I said, yeah, I know Maureen very well. He says, if you can get me a date with her, you're on the team. Now, I was on the bubble, and believe me, I had no assurance I was making the team. I was praying I might make the team, but, there were quite a few guys, and in my eyes, I saw other guys that I thought were playing just as well as I would. But if this was going to give me an edge, you knew I was going to take it. So I called up Maureen, and I said, Maureen, you got to do me a big favor. I told her what the favor was, and then she said, well, who's the guy? I said, Jack Riley. Oh, Jack, I've heard he's got a bad temper. I said, no. When he's on the ice, he's very aggressive and all that, but off the ice, he's the sweetest guy you'd ever want to meet. She said, well, I'm dating one of your buddies, Puddle Murphy. I said, oh, my golly. I said, well, I hope Puddle understands, but Maureen, you got to do this for me. And she did. She went out with Jack. I made the team, and the rest is history.
Jack, that's blackmail.
Well, I don't know if it's blackmail or not, but I didn't bring it up. I went along with it once I was told I could make the team.
Would that be considered an NCAA violation?
All the Riley boys know this story. Believe me, every one of them, starting with Jay. I mean, they've all come up to me at certain times, and you know what they say? Hey, thanks for introducing my mother to my father. I think that, but it's been kind of a fun thing that we've all talked about it, and I've never tried to hide the fact why I made the team.
No, then you could brag on that one. That's all right. That's all right. I'm sure it'd be considered an NCAA violation today, but you know.
Could be.
So
well, I'll tell you, that was an incredible year for me because I was only 21 at the time, and all these other guys that had so much experience. I probably learned more hockey in the 3 or 4 months we were in Europe than I had ever learned prior to that, and I carried many of those coaching points on into my career. So it was a great experience, and I cherish it to this day.
it's unreal how you pick things up along the way, little, bits and pieces from everybody,
Yeah.
Let me see. All right, so you're not only a great hockey coach, you're an excellent matchmaker, so we'll keep that in mind. All right, let me throw some names at you here, and get your thoughts on the names I'm going to throw out at you.
I hope I remember them.
I'm sure you do. Number one, I'm sure you saw my father play, and I'm sure you saw Dick Desmond play, right?
What's that?
You saw my father play, right?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And you saw Dick Desmond play also, right?
Dickie Desmond, the goaltender from Medford?
Yeah.
Well, I played with him on the GBI All-Star teams, and then I played against him when he was at Dartmouth.
How would you describe their goaltending styles? Were they stand-up guys or floppers or what?
Well, I would say that Desmond was more of a stand-up guy, playing angles and things of that nature. Your dad, I think, was more acrobatic, maybe a better physical, more athletic. Maybe I'll put it that way. But Desmond was great at standing and square on to the play, and he was a very, very good hockey player. As a matter of fact, this is another little hidden note. We lost to the GBI Montreal Catholic in the GBI All-Star game, 3-2, and I was on the ice when the third goal got scored, and it hit the side of my arm and deflected and went by Desmond. So he didn't have a chance, and I inadvertently caused the winning goal for Montreal. And it's funny how you don't forget those things.
No, I remember once I stopped an icing and put it in the net, and I still have nightmares about that. So I know what you mean. Walter Brown.
Well, Walter Brown was an incredible gentleman. I got to know him quite well. He came over during the World Championship games because Jack was playing and coaching at the same time, and Walter went behind the bench, and he handled the coaching duties throughout the tournament. He was really a great guy. He was I don't care who you were. There's this guy that everybody knew and owned the Celtics, owned the Bruins, owned everything, and he was just a regular guy. He put you at ease immediately when he was in your company. You thought he was one of your best friends. A great gentleman. Certainly died way, way too soon.
Did he die young? I wasn't aware of that.
I think I was instrumental in coming up with his name for the naming of the BU facility, Walter Brown, because he had just died maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years prior to that, and I think I convinced the college he would be the appropriate guy to name the rink after him. And for his position in the world of hockey, I think it was a real good move.
Definitely an appropriate call. That was a great venue for a hockey game too. I love that rink. Let's see. There's a guy who people forget about, and I know you followed him, Robbie Ftorek. What kind of a player? What kind of a player was he when he was around here in high school and stuff?
Well, Robbie Ftorek was a lot like, now hold your hat, he was a lot like Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah,
Wayne could do
I could see
anything on
that.
the ice, and Robbie could too.
Yeah.
I tried to get him into BU, and he was going to need a year of prep school, and I got him all set up for prep school, and I thought he was going. And at the last minute, a junior A team up in the Maritimes convinced him to go up there, and he went on and played exceptionally well at that level. And then when the WHA started, I think he had been drafted by Detroit, but had not signed with them. And we were talking to him about coming with the Whalers.
Exactly.
And probably I misjudged our position, and I didn't offer as much as I should have. I wished I had in retrospect, because he's really an outstanding player and could play at the NHL level and did. And, one of the better Boston kids who came through during that period of time, if not the best.
Well, growing up in Newton, and he was from Needham. All anybody talked about in the '70s was Robbie Ftorek and just how great he was.
Well, and with good reason too, Joe. With good reason.
Yeah. All right, Harry Cleverly.
Harry, my coach. Harry was a great guy. Harry was made to be the coach of the veterans coming out of World War II. Harry was a veteran himself, but all the guys were older, and Harry took that into consideration in the way he handled those players. He would make his point, he would tell you what he wanted, and then he would kind of let you do what he wanted you to do, and you respected him, and you try to follow through. No one would try to take advantage of Harry. That's a successful program with more mature players. When you get younger kids, that might not be so successful, and I think that was Harry's downfall. Harry was a great conditioner. He had everybody ready to play when we were ready. I don't think he wasn't the in-between period coach that Snooks was. Snooks, could get up and get blood out of a turnip, but we all responded to Harry in his way.
Harry Cleverly. What about Fernie Flaman?
Fernie Flaman? Well, I got to know Fernie way back when he first came up and played for the Boston Olympics. He was only 15 years old when he came in. And I'll tell you, pound for pound, there was nobody tougher than Fernie. I mean, he was a perfect, laid-back gentleman off the ice. But you put him on a pair of skates and stick him out there, and I'll tell you, nobody was tougher. And I'm sure a lot of people have said that. I got to play against him as a coach when he was at Northeastern, and just a wonderful, great guy. As good a guy as he was, outstanding hockey player.
Well, that's like all you guys. You're the nicest guys in the world, but you put a sweater on you turn into savages.
I don't know about that.
Cooney Weiland. What about Cooney Weiland?
Well, Cooney, the wise old Cooney. He was a laid-back guy, and you had to listen to what Cooney said, because sometimes they were very profound, and you might miss them. But Cooney had a great way with him, and I think the guys who played for him really loved playing for him, and he always had a word of praise for everybody. If you got to sit down and talk to him, he'd give you all the time in the world. Never hurried a conversation. Super nice guy, and well-liked by all the other coaches, and very well respected by the players from other teams.
Al Smith.
Al Smith, my goaltender?
Yep.
Oh, Al was a hell of a goaltender, really. Great at coming up with big moments. Was two different guys. He loved poetry. He read any and every book he could get his hands on. Could talk about any subject you wanted to talk about, and could play a hell of a game of hockey. But if he got annoyed and something was bothering him, you were rest assured you were going to have to deal with a tornado. And he didn't mince words. He always let you know exactly where he felt. But a very, very profound guy.
He's a hell of a goalie too. Oh my God.
Yes, he was.
Who were your, when you were growing up, who was your guy? Like, you know, Jimmy Logue says for him it was Terry Sawchuk. My father
Very
was
easy. Very easy.
Okay.
My guy was Milt Schmidt.
Milt Schmidt.
Schmidt, yeah. He was my hero. Later in life, I think Bobby Orr was everybody's and mine too. But when I was a kid growing up, Milt Schmidt, I wore his number. I went to a lot of Bruin hockey games, and I got to know Milt very, very well. I'll tell you a quick story. I don't know how much time we have here.
We have all day and all day tomorrow.
All right. I'm recruiting up in Montreal, and ironically, I'm staying at the same hotel the Bruins are staying, and they're going in to play Montreal that night. I had got to know Milt earlier when we were going on that AHA team. He was hurt and injured, and he had to work himself back into condition to play. And he skated with us for maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior to returning to the Bruins. And I got to know him a little bit, so he knew who I was. So when I got the job at BU, I had a couple of times where I met him and we had conversations. But anyway, getting back to this night, I'm up in the same hotel, and I'm walking into the lobby, and it was just before he was going to leave to go to the forum. Milt sees me, he comes over, what are you doing here? And I explained it all. He says, are you going to the game? I said, no, I don't need to. Well, come on, come with us. I said, well, I would love to. He said, just stay with us, walk right in with us. So I did. We went in the bus, went over, walked into the rink. He says, I'll tell you what, go down at the other end of the bench and handle the door down that end. I'll take the one up this end. I said, you kidding? No. He says, all you got to do is open the door, let the players in, let the players out. And that's what I did. And if you don't think that was one of the biggest thrills of my life, sitting at the end of the Boston Bruins bench in the Montreal Forum, I couldn't wait to get home to tell my wife and my kids what I had just done.
Jeez, that's pretty cool. You don't forget that. Oh my God.
No.
Oh,
I was still young enough in the game that I was pretty starry-eyed over that, believe me.
Yeah. He used to let us in.
But that was Milt. That's the kind of guy Milt was. I mean, he had a way of making you feel very at ease.
Yeah.
Now, that's one of the things I've always said about Jack Parker. You can talk to Jack, and maybe by the time you finish, you'll walk away thinking Jack Parker is one of your best friends. He has that ability, and that's what's one of the things that's made him so popular as a person and as a coach.
He's a good guy, and we were talking, and we'll tell everybody this, when we were talking off camera the other night, and I said in the interim since us talking last Thursday, everyone's calling me saying, oh, Jack Kelley's greatest coach of all time. And I said to you, I said, well, I'm starting to believe them. But I told Jack Parker that I thought he was the greatest coach of all time. And then you had the best line. This was on Good Friday. And you said, well, he was one of my disciples. Which I thought was so appropriate being Easter weekend. You know what I mean?
Well, listen, I'm willing to nod to Jack.
Yeah.
40 years with the success he's had and the kind of coaches he's sent into the game and the players.
Yeah.
He can be the best. If I'm second to him, that's pretty good for me.
Yeah, that's good for anybody. 43, I think, if you count the 3 years he was with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which leads me to the next thing, and we kind of touched on this last week, but a bunch of guys were asking me to kind of get your thought process on this. Now, you won back-to-back NCAA titles your last couple of years at BU, and then this new entity called the World Hockey Association starts, and you go to the Whalers. And a couple of guys were like, geez, I can't believe he left BU after doing back-to-back titles. And I'd like to try to get into kind of your thought process, decision-making process at that period. You're at BU, the Whalers. It's kind of an unknown entity. What was?
Well, right. Well, first of all, I had certain goals when I went to BU. Went there to put a rink on the campus and to win a national championship and to win a few bean pots along the way. Well, we did get the rink, and we did win a couple of national championships, and we won 6 out of 7 bean pots throughout the last few years I was there. So pretty much I had achieved what I wanted to achieve. And I'm not putting down BU or anything, but I operated with 10 one-year contracts. Now, I was never concerned because I was confident enough to know if I left BU, I could probably find another coaching jobs. So that wasn't hanging over my head or anything I was worried about.
Right.
But I knew, BU could live or not live without me, and I started to think for myself as to what may be best for Jack Kelley and his family. Well, Whalers came along, offered me a 7-year contract, gave me a very healthy salary with a signing bonus, which dwarfed what anything BU was going to do. And I just thought it was time to move on, and I want to challenge myself. Could I coach at the NHL level, at the pro level? And it was a unique experience. I was going to have a chance to put my own team together. I was not only the coach, I was the general manager. So I got to make all the decisions. And I felt pretty confident that I knew the NHL players, and I knew what kind of players I would be looking for. And, I was lucky enough to sign the more important ones. And I also knew what college players I felt could step in and contribute. And I was pretty lucky there, too, because I didn't make too many mistakes at that level.
No, you certainly did not. You certainly did not. That team was loaded, that Whalers team. Which fight song do you like better, the BU Peter Gunn theme or the Whalers theme song?
I kind of like the Whalers song.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a pretty unique song, and the team was really kind of identified by it. So I liked the Peter Gunn song.
Yeah.
I didn't dislike it, but I think the other kind of jumps right out at you.
Yeah, the Whalers one was pretty cool. Did Colby have a fight song?
Well, when I was there, we did, but I think they changed it. It was Mule Train.
Oh,
Frankie Lane.
I know that song. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Remember that Mule Train, and when we'd come out on the ice, I used to say, "Kids' skates never touch the ice; they'd come flying out."
That is hysterical. Oh my God. Who was the? This is going to be tough. We'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4. Who was the best high school hockey player you ever saw?
Best high school hockey player I ever saw. Wow. Well, I played with him. I think Jack Garrity was as good as anybody I can remember. Jack Garrity's before everybody else's time, but Jack Garrity was probably the greatest competitor I ever played with, bar none. And you play on a Jack Garrity team, boy. You went up and down the ice and did what you're supposed to do. He was that kind of player. And it wasn't that he didn't have to say it. He led by example. That's a tough question, a great question. And probably after I get off the phone here, I'll think of 5 that I should have mentioned.
Yeah, well, that's all right. That jumped out first. The best NCAA hockey player you ever saw?
The best NCAA hockey player? Well, 2. And Jacoby.
Okay.
Ron, yeah, I know. Ron Ryan would have gone right into the pros attic. I might have had trouble keeping him at Colby. There were only 6 teams playing at that point in time. Ronnie wasn't big, but believe me, anybody who played Colby and played against us, I think walked away saying, what a hockey player he was.
He was that good. Okay.
Yes, he was.
Who, in your mind, was the best WHA player you ever saw who did not come from the NHL?
Well, Wayne Gretzky.
Gretzky, he was 17 years old, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, I was instrumental. I tried to get Wayne to come to Hartford, and Howard knows his story. I had negotiated a contract with his agent, and I came back to Howard, and Howard was nervous. We were right in the middle and almost close to making an agreement with the NHL. And the NHL was very, very sensitive to about who we were taking, and I think at the time Wayne was almost 17 or 18. Wayne will tell you this story because he's also repeated it to my son Mark at one point in time. But anyway, we negotiated a contract, and all I needed was Howard's approval. And Howard's begged off. He says, I just can't say yes because I'm afraid it'll affect our particular team going into the NHL. They'll be that upset. So Wayne was still anxious to leave and play pro hockey. So Indianapolis signed him, and I think they used the negotiations that I had worked out with his agent. And he was there for like a year, maybe a year and a half, and then was traded from Indianapolis to Edmonton. And look what he did for Edmonton. What did they do? Win 4 Stanley Cups first 4 years into the NHL.
What do you think of some of the guys that came out of the WHA that were just unbelievable? I mean, there's guys who were in both Hall of Fames. Mark Howe was in both Hall of Fames.
People might question that story, but I'll tell you, get a hold of Wayne, and I think he'll confirm it.
Well, put me in touch with him. I don't have his number. Let's see. Who's the best hockey player you ever saw at any level that nobody knows about?
Whoa.
You know what I mean?
That's hockey. No, I'm trying to think of, what kind of circumstances would I have seen him in?
Like just some guy that just went unnoticed that should have been noticed,
Well, there was a lot of great pond skaters, but I gotta plead the fifth on that one.
You take the fifth? All right.
Can't come up with it.
All right. The defense rests on that one. Let me see. If you can compare today's, I call it the plastic and styrofoam game, and it's so fast. Compare the old leather and felt game with today's plastic and styrofoam game. Which game do you prefer? How do you think it's changed? Do you think it's changed for the better or the worse?
The college game, what's being played right now?
Just all around, where it's so fast and the equipment is so light now.
Well, I think the game is much faster, much bigger, great skill, but I think in a sense there was a lot more individual skill back maybe 15, 20 years ago. Players didn't run each other and create the mayhem that they do now. You put a mask on a player and everybody thinks they're Jack Dempsey. And a lot of players who aren't particular, as tough as they appear, can do a lot of damage out there and have. I just think the face mask has changed the game a lot. Everybody was concerned for eyes and teeth and stitches, and we all had them and lost, not the eyes, but the broken noses, the stitches in the teeth, and we survived, and game went along fine. But now it's a little different. I think that's changed the game a lot. But the game is great today. Players are better. They're bigger, more skilled in many ways, and you can get 20 pretty outstanding players on one team. Back when I played at maybe in high school and the college, if you had 3 or 4 or 5 players who knew what they were doing, they could probably control the game. So I think that's probably the biggest change.
Yeah. What's your favorite hockey movie?
My favorite hockey movie, it's the one my son wrote, David.
Mystery Alaska.
Mystery Alaska, that's it, right. That's my favorite.
That's a great movie. That is, and I did not know he wrote it until I looked it up last night randomly, and I was like, geez, I didn't know David wrote that. That and Slapshot, and there's a movie called The Rocket about Rocket Rashad. Those are my top 3.
Yeah.
Those are
I
my
haven't
top
seen
3.
that last one.
Oh, it's a great movie.
Slapshot was great, a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. But,
Yep.
and I might be a little biased in the sense that I'm taking Mystery Alaska.
Well,
I think anybody would forgive me for that.
well, I'm not biased, and it's tied for first in my group. So that's that. Now let's see who came up with the name the New England Whalers.
Oh, well, I'm really pleased to tell you that. When I was thinking of going with the Whalers, they had sent back a list of names to my house, and I was in the den, and my wife was in the kitchen getting supper ready for the family. And I would say, what about the lobsters? And we'd both laugh. And the seagulls, and we'd both laugh. And they had about 30 names, and all of a sudden, she said, what about the New England Whalers? I said, well, it's not here, but it sounds like a good one. So I went back to the next day when I was visiting with Howard Baldwin. I said, I got a name for you, the Whalers. He said, geez, I like that. And from that, they, talked it amongst themselves, and whoever's making those decisions said, that's it. And Howard and everybody else who was around during those days give Jen full credit for naming the team.
So, proof positive that the real brains behind the Whalers was not Jack Kelley, but Ginny Kelley.
Oh, I guess so. She knew how to keep me grounded, believe me.
And I wanna share with everybody. Today is Easter Sunday was just a few days ago, and we talked last week. And in the interim, on Easter Sunday, Ginny Kelley passed, and Jack, now 3 days later, wanted to keep doing the interview. So I know we're dedicating this to Travis Roy, but we're also going to dedicate this interview to the memory of Ginny Kelley. And
thank you. That's very nice.
so Jack, what was your first date with Ginny? How did you guys meet?
Well, she was in Belmont like I did, and she actually was the sister of a kid I went through Belmont High with. Her brother was Eddie Wheaton, and I knew Eddie pretty well. But more than that, she knew my younger brother, Paul, very well. And I had bumped into her at a gathering once, and oh my golly, who's that? Found out. And the funny part about it really is, I'm thinking, well, she certainly knows who I am. So I call for my first date, and she says, when I said, hi, this is Jack Kelley, she says, do I know you?
Ooh, hard to get,
I was
huh?
starting from zero, believe me.
Playing,
And the
huh?
only thing I could think of is, my brother Paul, I think you know. So that's where it started, and that's somewhere like 70 years ago. But she was, listen, my boys were around and we were talking. We think she must have logged in well over 1,000 hockey games. All three boys played, pee-wee, high school, college, and she very often, when they were young, had to arrange for rides for all of them because they all were at a different level and playing in sometimes different rinks was a bonanza if they were all in the same rink. But nevertheless, she went to all those games. She went to all my games at Colby, everyone at BU, everyone with the Whalers. Other than the away games, she never missed many. So she's one of the original hockey moms.
Hockey mother, but also the spouse of a hockey coach, so she had double duty.
Well, she got to know a lot of the players, certainly the college players, and if I got talking, she knew who I was talking about, and that always helped the conversation a great deal.
So I don't think there's any doubt if you had to pick your all-time most valuable player, it would be Ginny.
Well, in my lifetime, absolutely.
It would be Ginny. Well, as Snooks Kelley used to say about the Beanpot, it's not just a hockey must, it's a social must. And with this hockey lockdown life we're living now, talking to you has been a social must also, and a hockey must.
Been fun for me, Joe. Believe me, I really love to talk the game. You made me think back a little bit, things I've forgotten about, and you've asked me some questions that I really couldn't come up with very profound answers. But it's a great game. We're all blessed to be a part of it. It's still small enough that we all seem to get to know everybody in the game, or that we get to know the name, and we're familiar with that person's part in the game.
All right, well, stay on the line after we say goodbye, and I'm going to paraphrase two of your old friends, Snooks Kelley and my father, and from the snooker I'm going to say, see you, kid, and from my father I'm going to say to you, keep it going, kid.
Okay.
All right?
All right, Joe. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed this, believe me.
Thank you so much. All right, stay on the line, and I'm just gonna say goodbye. Jack, say goodbye to everybody who's watching and listening, all the rink rats.
Goodbye, gang. Stay with the game. It's one of the best.
All right, Mr. Jack Kelley, the dean of a lot of different areas of hockey, but I think the creator and inventor of United States professional hockey, and that's that. And it's been a treat and an honor and a privilege to be able to talk to you, and will continue to do so. My new best friend, Mr. Jack Kelley. Thanks, Jack.
Well, Joe, I'm flattered. Thank you kindly.